London-based Grime MC Stormzy has just put out an extremely perplexing record of equally confusing songs. Now whether or not that's a good or bad thing, you'll have to stay tuned to find out. But first, let's talk about a little background. In the same way Metallica is the safest, most mainstream version of metal in the industry, Stormzy tends to be a rather mainstream interpretation of the London Grime scene, making him an excellent artist to reel people in, but not exactly to present the most authentic Grime MC experience. For that you point to MCs like Wiley and JME, who are often credited as acting as somewhat of fathers for the genre. Now this isn't actually a bad thing in the slightest. In fact, Stormzy's last album, Heavy as the Head, despite not being the grimiest grime to have ever grimed, still ended up being an extremely impressive and admirable project from the artist, filled to the brim with tight flows, slick wordplays, but the biggest quirk to this thing in my opinion is Stormzy's versatility. Stormzy manages to masterfully go from hard grime MC to a powerfully vulnerable poet seemingly at whim, and he has the perfect voice for it. In the lead up for this record, we got two singles which I will withhold my opinion on right now as I'll get to them later, but we also got Mel Made Me Do It, a hugely ambitious and long track that I really enjoyed, and even if I do believe it dragged out ever so slightly, to my utter surprise and slight dismay however, Mel Made Me Do It is nowhere to be seen on this album's track listing, which is bold to say the least. And this is where what I mean's confusing vibes begin, because like I said at the start, I'm so bewildered by this thing. Let's just get to the tracks. Fire Plus Water is certainly a brave tune to open the album with, considering the status of this artist as the king of grime. Most records of this magnitude from rappers such as this one will begin with some of the most impressive and almost autobiographical rap that they can come out with. Take JME's 96 of My Life for example.
After man paid the student fees, I went to Jetstar and pressed my CDs.
Instead, Stormzy decides to take a far more melodic approach, and also a rather long one with this track, clocking in at over 8 minutes long. We see some of that aforementioned versatility from Stormzy, who had previously opened with some extremely zippy and powerful vocals, but is able to make himself sound truly vulnerable here in a way that also exudes power, because there is absolutely power in vulnerability. The lyrics display this in the best way, detailing the feelings of Stormzy regarding an ex-lover, Maya Jama. And to be honest, I don't think it drags on for too long at all. The time actually flew by, to be frank, which is especially surprising considering the slower flow at hand. Now I personally don't vibe with the man's singing voice as much as I'm sure he'd like us to, and the song doesn't hit too hard emotionally once again as I'm sure he'd like it to, but a lot of the secondary and backup singers do aid with this, with the notable exception of Jacob Collier, who for some reason features a lot on this record, but I don't think he really adds too much. He's not the best singer unfortunately. I definitely appreciate the experimentation of this track and its placement here, but in practice I'm not too in love with it. It's fine, but Mel Made Me Do It would have been a far more successful opener. And speaking of songs that would have been better openers, the title track, This Is What I Mean, would have made for a far better opener in my opinion, with explosive and hearty production, eerie choir effects in the background, there's a nice piano chord progression in there as well as some well-implemented violins. Stormzy has some great bars about transformation, referencing previous projects and outlining how he's changed from them, and a very tight flow. The bass permeates throughout the entire runtime rather successfully. I do have to say, however, that the chorus I found to be rather messy and unorganized, and not in a charming way at all, without really any lyrics to gawk at either. I'm detecting a tinge of Frank Ocean in Fire Babe. In fact, throughout this entire project it seems as though Stormzy really desires to be able to sing like a Frank Ocean. And to be fair, I do think these songs would be a lot better if Frank Ocean took vocal duties. And that's not to say that Stormzy's vocals are bad, because you can definitely hear a clear improvement from his earlier works, but it's also difficult for said singing voice to carry an entire track, as opposed to acting as a sub-seasoning for a more grimy rap-centric song, which is blatantly where Stormzy is still at his most comfortable. Yeah, this song is pretty mid. Please is one that I enjoyed more upon first listen, but in retrospect it blends in completely with every other track on this thing. Other than the lyrics, there really isn't anything interesting on show here. Whilst the quality of the instruments and production is impeccable, the actual chord progressions and instrumentation are all just so bland. But yes, I do like these lyrics quite a bit. Stormzy does know what he's doing in the writing department. Once you reach the fifth track, Need You, you begin to notice the continuous negative trend with this project. And that's that it's really boring. There is absolutely nothing noteworthy about this track. Hide and Seek is one of the worst singles I've heard from a mainstream grime artist. Its ridiculously bland production kills any potential enjoyment to be had here. Even Stormzy, with his incredibly impressive repertoire of vocal deliveries and thematic writing talent, is unable to mask just how dull its beat is. The features can clearly sing, but that doesn't make their contributions any less boring. Once again, other than the lyrics, there's nothing to see here, and even lyrically there's nothing too great either. Even though My Presidents Are Black isn't a track that I'd return to at all, at the very least it stands out slightly from the one-note flat sounds we've been hearing throughout this album, with a more trailing and bassy bass and some endearing slick wordplay. There's a nice Kendrick reference in there, as well as a Beatles one, which I appreciated. It's a shame that the actual sound once again has nothing to really offer. Sampha's Plea is just more of the same. If I were to play any of these songs from the minute mark, I'd be surprised if someone could actually differentiate them from each other. It has the same problem that the last Arctic Monkeys album had, where the instruments sound great because these are guys who are working with basically limitless budgets here, but not only does the sound not really suit the artist at hand's voice, but it all just becomes the same thing, which wouldn't be as much of an issue if that thing wasn't as bland as it is, but it is, so it's a pretty glaring issue. Now we get on to Holy Spirit, and I'm kind of getting sick of talking about this record. You could just copy and paste what I say at any point in this video. I like the lyrics, the song is boring. That's it. That's literally it. It's pretty clear to me that while Stormzy isn't a bad singer, he's also not a very versatile one. He just sort of has one monotone voice that he lazily sings in with almost an early Joji vibe in terms of how little he opens his mouth here. Alright, Bad Blood, and I'm not even going to compliment the lyrics anymore. Once again, they are the strongest aspect of this project, but there's a jarring revisiting of identical themes for every track. They all just mesh together in the least flattering, most forgettable way. I'm not even going to bother going over the rest of the album, man, it's all just so uninteresting. Sorry if you really wanted to hear my in-depth thoughts on I Got My Smile back or Give It to the Water, but there's genuinely nothing more I could add that I haven't said already.
You ain't got a clue, let's be honest.
Alright, conclusion time, baby, and it's going to be quite a short one, so buckle your seatbelts. Listen, I understand that this is an intensely personal project for Stormzy, and that's absolutely fine. I don't even believe he made this album with the intention of entertaining people. He doesn't care about his fans, and once again, that's fine. To conduct the orchestra, you gotta turn your back on the audience and all that. And when I say he doesn't care about his fans, I mean he doesn't really care about their opinions. It really feels as though he was making this for himself and no one else, which is admirable in many ways. But that doesn't mean that I don't hate it. There's not one track on this thing that I would even consider returning to. And as soon as I release this video, I'm never, ever going to think about this record again. I'm giving This Is What I Mean by Stormzy a 3 out of 10. Thank you for watching. As always, all likes, comments, and subscriptions are very much appreciated. Let me know what you thought of this album, mate. I'm gonna head out for now. I'll catch you in a bit. Much love.